I'm sure you know, many of you, most of you, that one of the most basic and actually most advanced practices is awareness of the breath. Actually, the most advanced practice in awareness of the breath is natural breathing, deep in the hara, where there is no control of the breath at all, where you surrender to the breath breathing itself. So if you are having a mind that is challenged, probably the best instruction is drop your mind into your breath, into your belly. And they've even shown, I believe, that breathing awareness in the belly actually produces alpha brainwaves. And if you breathe up, and if you're doing rapid or high chest breathing, you're stimulating beta, which activates thinking more. I don't know if that's still true, but that's what I knew years ago. So you could experiment and see if it works for you.
So a minute ago, John, you talked about deep breathing or belly breathing as a practice, really.
Natural breathing.
Natural breathing.
Yeah.
For me, with non-dualist work, sometimes I find it a bit dry or devoid of structured practice or technique. And, I think that's generally good. Mm-hmm. But sometimes, as you said, you can't get out of the head, or you're in a state and you could sit there and try some inquiry or try and drop into the presence, and it's just not coming, and you feel, or I feel, that then it would be nice to have some tools to, maybe different gateways to the presence.
Sure.
If in your experience, potentially from other traditions too, whether you find there are other more structured practices, techniques, approaches that can be helpful. And one in particular I would love to hear about is, you talked about, is it Ho'oponopono?
Ho'oponopono. Plus, I'd like to also say something about, just respond to what you were saying about non-dual, or the sort of the fundamentalist, I don't want to say fundamentalist, but let's just say the pointed teaching of just being presence, which I understand that. I mean, I certainly, my main teachers had that perspective. I mean, I'm talking about Jean Klein and Punjaji and Robert Adams. I mean, that was their primary focus. But Robert would certainly say, hey, if you need to meditate or do anything else, fine. Do whatever you need to do. And so I think that what's important, I just want to say this as a prelude to talking about Ho'oponopono, but I just want to say it because there's a lot of propaganda out there, I think, and misunderstanding, which is that people say, well, if you do practices, it strengthens the doer. And my response to that is, only if it does. It doesn't necessarily at all. If there isn't someone taking themselves to being a doer, then the practices could be profoundly helpful. That's why they've been around for as long as they've been, quite frankly. If they do strengthen the doer, then one should be sensitive enough to get clued into that the way one is doing something is strengthening the whole sense of, I'm doing this. But I think that's got to go at the beginning. That has to be, the cover on that has to be blown right away. So you can begin to not be the one who's meditating. When you don't take yourself to be a meditator, meditation is happening. You see? So you drop the sense of the doer. And then whether you follow whether the breath or do the Ho'oponopono or anything, then they work. Otherwise, they will strengthen the separation. And you'll become a very good practitioner. And that frees you up to try whatever you want to do. Because then it's not about, well, gee, I'm really worried that if I go to therapy, I'm just going to get more in my head. Well, maybe, depending on the therapist and how you approach it, but not necessarily. I mean, I had an awakening long before anybody used the word non-dual. And I didn't even know what it was for a long time. And I went into practices already having had that happen. So I was already tuning into presence before I knew what was even happening. Nobody was there to feed it back till I met Anne. And then Jon, of course. Jon was the most important, really, for giving me the clarity, because I didn't have teachers who were embodied prior to that. So, but you know what I love? You know Sri Aurobindo? He founded Auroville, Pondicherry, India. Mm-hmm. And he wrote an amazing work called The Life Divine, which I read bits of when I was first getting started on this path, decades ago, over 40 years ago. And he said one thing that really was, I think, important, which was, the greater the sinner, the greater the saint. Mm. And what he described is he says, if you start the path with a base this big, right, like a triangle, and you go up to the top, this is what you have to offer when you get up there, just this. But if you start here with a base this wide, it may take a little longer to get up here. But when you get up here, this is what you have to offer. Hmm. So he was all about living in the world as an awakened person. That inspired me then for where I'm at now with this and how to share this, because I think that's what's needed. Not just more arhats and sadhus. We need people who can be human beings, living in the world, interacting, working, having families, and so forth. So that's why the Ho'oponopono work, I think, is amazing work, because it totally, if you ever listen to Hugh Lin, you could go on YouTube and watch him, but he's native Hawaiian and beautiful. He's a psychologist, actually. If you hear him talk about this, you realize he totally gets what we're doing here, 100%. But it's so humanistic. It is so completely devoid of superiority. He says, well, I judge all the time. He said, and this guy is one of the most radiant people around. If you're with him, his presence is phenomenal. And he says, he says, I've given myself the what do you say, that if I could go through one day without judging, I'll buy myself a big, giant ice cream sundae, and I still haven't had that day. And I thought, no, I love this guy. So the Ho'oponopono is really, I think it comes from a tradition, of tremendous love of life and nature, and the tropics, and a connection with nature, and just this heart coming from the heart. It's so heart-centered, So it's really about healing the heart. And we live in a culture mostly that's so top-heavy, right? Mm. We're just so mostly up here that it's just, we're imbalanced. So I think the Ho'oponopono can drop you down really into the heart. You could just say these phrases. It's pretty simple. And not know what, it could just seem like rote, like just try it. And see what happens. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. And not know what it means. But try it. It's, let's say, what I have found in the process is that what you're really communicating when you're saying that is your true self, your divinity, your infinite wisdom and infinite creative force that we are one with. Do you understand? Not some belief or thought about it. Just this. And these words are so incapable of communicating what I'm really trying to say here. But it's a hint at what it means to do that.
So you say the 4 phrases right together like you just did?
Yeah.
To yourself silently or?
Yeah.
And is it good for certain situations or mind states?
Well, I would, I would say, get on YouTube, look up Dr. Hugh Len, Hewlen, and he has a really good series of, I think, 8-minute interviews that he did down in Monterey. It's about an hour interview or something, but they broke it up into segments. Watch the whole thing. And he gives a beautiful teaching. Yeah, so it's, I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. One of the things he says is we need to be forgiven. Because people feel like they did something wrong, they're bad. I mean, there's so much of that people are burdened with.
Yeah.
And there's something about asking that's powerful. So, and of course, this is a higher level. This is not about, this is tricky. This is when it gets tricky to talk about it, because what the point of it is to return back to connection, to communicate to that that has you out of connection. And so he uses judgments. Judgments, when we're really caught in judgment, we are disconnected. I like his approach because it's heart-centered. I was one of my dear mentors and dear friends from a good part of my life, Fritz Smith, Dr. Fritz Smith, who founded Zero Balancing Work and great osteopath. He studied with Hugh, and I was talking to him, and he turned me on to it. He always turns me on to good stuff. And he said, try it out, just try it. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is really amazing.
So would you bring it into this kind of a setting or practice, or more in the day-to-day world where something hits you and you need to get present with it?
Hey, you could certainly use it here. People do. I don't know if you've heard me share this before, Toby, but when I met the Dalai Lama when he first came here, and his first trip, I don't remember, it was a long time ago. I was a Zen student. And some of us went over, he was giving a talk at the Nyingma Center in Berkeley. And I went over there, and I thought he was great. He said something I'll never forget, which is he said, you in the West here have so much that can help you. He says, take advantage of as much as you can, of much help as you can, because you need all the help you can get. I thought, right on. Because I was living with people who was like Zazen über alles. When I left Zen Center, I was going to have a T-shirt printed, I was a Zen Nazi. It was like, no, seriously, people looked down upon me because I was doing yoga. And back then, no one did anything but Zazen. You were actually looked down upon if you did yoga. Like, what? Just Zazen, what are you doing that for? It was heavy duty. Now they're all yoga teachers, yoga teachers. Just wait a few decades. They'll start wearing pink. I think any true test of my litmus test is, if it's working, is if the space is opening or it's getting tighter. If the field of awareness is expanding or you're getting more in separation. If it's expanding and opening up, and maybe even if stuff's moving, it's working.
Yeah, but is there, in terms of pointed questions or inquiry, that you find or have found particularly helpful?
My own personal practice was much more kinesthetic. Was very body-oriented and emotional-based. The mind was truly a torture chamber for me. So I would just go to the breath. Because, in those days I didn't have any other practices, so I didn't do anything else. So it was body work and meditation for a long time. And then sitting with Jon and so forth like that. But since then, I think that I've certainly found that there are things to help the mind's obsessiveness. One of the ones that I think is very helpful, in fact, those of us who were, we were on retreat with Jean Klein down in Yucca Valley a long time ago, and a woman named Garnita Parent, I think who was a psychologist, had just trained with Francine Shapiro at the beginning of the EMDR movement, eye movement desensitization reprocessing work. I've since gotten to know Francine. I really like her a lot. EMDR, eye movements. And I mean, eye movements have been around for a long time. Even yogic practices have eye movements. But eye movements can be a way to actually free the mind. You can just try it on your own. She actually, her last book, which she sent me the galley for, was, I think, kind of a do-it-yourself book. I think it was called Getting Past Your Past. I love that title. So I would definitely check that out. Powerful stuff. I mean, it treats post-traumatic stress syndrome. And you can go to people who do it. There are therapists who are trained in it. So that's another, I think, helpful thing. Some people have found EFT.
Yeah, the tapping.
Yeah, the tapping stuff. And there's I think there's all kinds of, I don't have, people tell me about all these things, and I think, okay, let's see, I remember Brother David, I learned about EFT, and he and I were hanging out. I think I was giving him a zero balancing session when he was up at his little retreat place in Sonoma for a while, and I was showing him how to do EFT, and he had some pain or something, and he just started the first thing, and immediately all the pain disappeared. He was that clear. I mean, it's amazing. It was really funny, actually. I used to love working on him. It was like working on a saint. It's just his energy was so alive. But Jean Klein used to talk about, his yogic training was really what he called body work. He didn't call it yoga, he called it body work. And so it's the deepest healing work you can do is to direct attention into the body while you're sitting. So wherever you're getting pain or discomfort or emotional stuff, just bring your attention there. That's Qigong work. I mean, it's really you're opening up the meridians, basically, with attention, with awareness, and breath. You got me going on this one, didn't you?
No, it's good. It's good. I just got to remember what you said. You need to put it down on paper, all these acronyms. And yeah, thank you, John, for everything.
You're so welcome, Toby. I appreciate the questions and being with you.